Welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where every story unravels a secret. So, let's dive into another story. It was a beautiful spring morning as I woke up next to my wife, Emily. Her gorgeous red hair was sprayed across the pillow and a serene smile played across her lips as she slept peacefully. I couldn't help but smile myself, thinking how lucky I was to be married to such an amazing woman. As quietly as I could, I slipped out of bed and tipped to the kitchen to make Emily's favorite, pancakes with fresh berries and whipped cream. Our 5th wedding anniversary was coming up soon and I wanted to start getting things ready for a big celebration. Emily deserved nothing less after being such a wonderful, caring partner all these years. While the pancake batter rested, I logged onto my computer to book a private dining room at our favorite restaurant. I could already picture the elegant candlelit dinner, sharing a bottle of the deep red wine Emily loved so much. Maybe I'd even hire a string quartet to play softly in the background. Emily was the classiest woman I knew, and she deserved to be treated like royalty, especially on our anniversary. Something smells delicious. Emily's melodic voice pulled me from my planning as she appeared, tying her robe around her slender frame. Morning beautiful, I grinned, pulling her into an embrace and kissing her deeply. Pancakes. From my pancake. Emily laughed, that tinkling laugh that made my heart flutter. They're too much, but I love it. We settled at the kitchen table to enjoy the pancakes together, chatting and making plans for the anniversary. Emily's green eyes sparkled with excitement about the idea of the private dinner. You always go so above and beyond, John. I'm the luckiest wife in the world. She smiled warmly, reaching across the table to give my hand a squeeze. If only I had known then what was coming, that squeeze would be the last loving touch for my wife that I'd feel for a long time. A few days later, I had to leave town for a business trip. It was just a short couple of days, nothing major, but I hated being away from Emily even briefly. Still, she insisted I go and focus on work, saying she'd be fine. I'll just catch up on some reading, maybe do a little shopping, Emily assured me as I hesitantly threw some clothes into my suitcase. Don't worry about me, babe. I pulled her into a tight hug, inhaling her sweet floral scent. I'll miss you, but I'll be home before you know it. Giving her one last lingering kiss, I headed out, completely unaware of how my life was about to be shattered into a million pieces. The convention I was attending was mind-numbingly boring, made worse by constantly checking my phone with no new messages from Emily. I chalked it up to her being busy and forced myself to pay attention, giving a presentation on some financial nonsense I could hardly care less about. My mind was elsewhere, counting down the hours until I could hop on a plane back home to Emily's loving arms. If I had known she was in the arms of another man at that very moment, maybe I would have stayed away forever. By the time I finally returned home, Emily acted so normal and loving that I never suspected a thing at first. We kissed, we hugged, we asked about each other's couple of days apart. She seemed genuinely happy to see me, which made the truth all the more gutting. It was the next day that everything changed. My mother-in-law, Diane, had decided to stop by in the morning to surprise Emily with some baked goods from her favorite bakery. Diane herself relayed to me the horrors she witnessed upon arriving at our home. Horrors that still make my blood boil to this day. Diane said she pulled into the driveway around 10 a.m., basket of pastries in hand, expecting to find Emily home alone. When she rang the doorbell and got no answer, she tried the door and found it unlocked, which struck her as odd. Calling out Emily's name, she ventured inside, concerned something might be wrong. That's when she heard the unmistakable sounds, grunts and moans emanating from our bedroom. Diane's face drained of color, realizing exactly what she'd walked in on. Part of her didn't want to see, didn't want to make it real, but she felt compelled to confirm her deepest fear. Slowly, she crept down the hallway, the sounds growing louder with each step. Diane's shaking hand grasped the bedroom doorknob and eased it open, just a crack at first. What she saw through that sliver of an opening turned her stomach. There was Emily, my wife, naked and tangled among the sheets with another man. Some faceless stranger. They were locked in a passionate, animal embrace, oblivious to the world around them. Diane watched in sick and shock as her daughter's head lolled back, a look of pure ecstasy on her face that had nothing to do with me. That's when the man grunted something that made Diane's heart stop. "Yeah, you like that, baby? Your full husband's out of town, so we can have all the fun we want." At that, Diane slammed the door shut, her head spinning. She wanted to vomit, scream, cry, all at once. Instead, she backed out of the house, clutching the forgotten pastry basket with white knuckles. As she relayed this to me, I felt my own world crumbling. I wanted to deny it, insist there must be some mistake. The perfect image I had of my wife, my marriage, it was all a lie. Consumed by agonizing heartbreak, I could barely process Diane's words. "I'm so sorry, John," she said gently, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "I took a picture, just in case you didn't believe me. You deserve to know the truth." Reluctantly, Diane pulled out her phone and thumbed at the screen. She turned it to face me, bracing me for what I was about to see. And there it was, concrete proof of Emily's betrayal, a photo of her in a passionate lip lock with some unknown man, their bodies intertwined. It made me want to vomit. At first, I stubbornly clung to the idea that it must be some misunderstanding, some huge mistake, not Emily, not my sweet, loving wife. I pleaded with Diane, asked if she was certain it was Emily. Of course she was, having recognized her own daughter. For a few torturous days, I was in complete denial, desperate to preserve the perfect image of the woman I loved. Emily herself remained as loving and normal as ever, never suspecting that I knew her secret. But Diane's damning evidence was imprinted into my mind, the picture haunting my every waking moment. Finally, I realized I had to accept the painful truth. Something deep inside me shattered into a million pieces. My beautiful, innocent Emily was gone, replaced by this devious, cheating stranger. And in that moment, the hurt and rage boiled over into an insatiable thirst for revenge. If this was how Emily wanted to play, game on. I was done being the fool. At first, my plots for Payback were unhinged, extreme. Simple things like confrontation or just divorcing her didn't seem enough after the soul-crushing way she demolished everything I thought we stood for. No, this demanded a more poetic, iconic form of vengeance. That's when the idea began taking shape. I would pretend that everything was normal between us, that I had no idea about her infidelity. And I would throw Emily the anniversary party of her dreams, a final shining accomplishment, before I brought her entire world crashing down around her in spectacular fashion. The first step was finding out who this Mark person was that Emily had been sleeping with. I combed through her phone records, text messages, emails, anything that could provide a clue to his identity. I got everything I wanted, all the proof of Emily's betrayal through her phone. Eventually, I discovered he was a co-worker at her office, some guy named Mark Hensley. From there, I dug deeper, looking him up on social media. I found listing for a Mark Hensley employed at the same company as Emily, with a wife named Claire and 2 young kids. So this dirtbag didn't even have the decency to be single while defiling my marriage. Perfect. My plan quickly fell into place. I would spare no expense for this anniversary party, ensuring it looked like the dreamiest night of Emily's life from the outside. Except I would also secretly invite Emily's lover Mark, along with his poor, unsuspecting wife. And at just the right moment, I'd expose their sordid affair to everyone in the most grandiose way possible. I started by booking an over-the-top venue, some gaudy banquet hall with chandeliers and polished marble floors. No cost was too ridiculous, not for the purposes of publicly eviscerating my traitorous wife in the most humiliating way I could fathom. Next, I hired a team of high-end caterers and event planners, telling them to spare no detail in creating a celebratory atmosphere worthy of a lavish valor renewal. God, how I would savor the look on Emily's face when she realized the true intentions. As the date loomed closer, I rented professional audio/visual equipment, setting up a giant projection screen to be the centerpiece of my vengeful unraveling. This would broadcast every last lurid detail of Emily and Mark's torrid romance to all our friends and loved ones. Nothing would be left to the imagination. I also took care to surreptitiously acquire contact information from Mark's wife Claire and extended family, making sure to get them on the carefully manicured guest list under the pretense of being my good friends. Emily still had no inkling that I was onto her, easily falling for my lies about wanting an extra special party just for us crazy kids. The days inched by with agonizing slowness leading up to the event. I could barely look at Emily without my blood boiling, though I managed to keep up a cool, calm facade around her. Let her live in blissful ignorance as I worked silently, putting my affairs in order for the coming storm. Finally, the night arrived. Our friends and family filtered into the opulent venue, decked out in their finest attire. Mark and Claire showed up with their kids, sunny smiles and not a care in the world. The poor fools. Emily looked positively radiant in the silvery dress I'd bought her, the one that clung to every curve. If not for my knowledge of her treachery, I might have gotten choked up seeing my wife on this night that was supposed to be so special. As it was, I could barely hide my revulsion. "Oh, John, you've outdone yourself," Emily gasped, throwing her arms around me in front of our guests. "This is all so beautiful. Nothing but the best for you, my dear," I replied smoothly, pulling her close in an embrace both intimate and menacing. Over her shoulder, I made deliberate eye contact with Mark where he stood by the bar, drink in hand. Let the games begin, I thought to myself. As the party kicked into full swing, I played the doting husband to perfection. I flitted around the venue, greeting guests with a bright smile and accepting congratulatory well wishes for Emily and me. All the while, I had to fight to keep my emotions in check whenever Mark was nearby, simpering over my wife like he had any right. The smug bastard didn't suspect a thing as he trailed Emily like a lovesick puppy. He'd shoot me knowing smirks whenever she turned away, mentally high-fiving himself for cuckolding me so thoroughly. If only he knew what was coming. "Looks like it's about time for some speeches." The MC's voice boomed over the microphone, silencing the dull roar of chatter. I shared one last pointed look with Mark before gesturing for Emily to join me at the front. As the crowd politely applauded, we ascended a small stage set up at the front of the hall. "Good evening, everyone," I projected with a bright smile, wrapping an arm possessively around Emily's waist. "First off, I just want to thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredibly special night with my beautiful wife and I." Emily beamed, leaning her head against my shoulder in what seemed like contented bliss. My stomach turned at how convincingly she could still play the role of loving spouse. The crowd ate it up with a chorus of Aussie. "Emily and I have had 5 wonderful years of marriage so far," I went on, allowing just a hint of solemnity to creep into my tone. "And I'll be honest, there were times I never thought we'd make it this far." A smattering of polite chuckles echoed through the hall as I paused deliberately, knowing full well I had everyone's rapture. Even Mark was watching me with an amused expression, like a father indulging his young son's attempts at humor, to look at my wife. This amazing, brilliant, beautiful woman. I swallowed hard, letting my voice crack with totally fake emotion. Should I ever do to deserve her? She is quite simply the most precious thing in my life. Emily squeezed my hand lovingly, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. The perfect portrait of martial bliss, at least on the surface. With a strained smile, I forced myself to go on with the charade, which is why it makes the betrayal all the more devastating. I stated, my words dropping like a bomb. You could have heard a pin drop in that cavernous hall. The smiles froze on people's faces as they processed that shocking statement. Emily's brow furrowed in confusion as she searched my face for answers. "John," she murmured quietly. "What are you saying?" Rather than reply to her, I whirled to face the crowd once again. "My wife," I said, mouth twisting in a sneer of revulsion. "My supposedly beloved partner has been unfaithful to me, and not just any infidelity of filthy, ordered affair with another married man." Audible ripple of gasps and murmurs cascaded through the stunned audience. Over in his corner, Mark's smile had been replaced by a look of pure panic. His wife Claire glanced between the two of us, realization and hurt dawning over her features. Ignoring Emily's plaintive cries, I jabbed furiously at my laptop, pulling up the video file. I'd prepared. With a sickening lurch, it projected in full HD glory across the massive screen behind us. There was Emily and Mark tangled in flagrant nudity amidst a scene of pure debauchery. The video was evidently captured by one of them during a heated tryst, all breathy, moans and crass language. Worse, it seemed they were doing this on the marital bed Emily and I once shared. "Oh my God," Emily croaked in a tiny voice, hands flying up to cover her mouth in horror. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I continued hitting the keyboard, a torrent of intimate emails and texts populating the screen montage, love notes, sex requests, plans for weekend getaways, and other sordid rendezvous. It was all there, indisputable evidence of their months-long affair. Every single email, text, video, and photo I'd recovered while investigating behind Emily's back. "John, please," she begged between sobs, tears streaming down her face. I could only shake my head, turning away from her in disgust. The audience sat in stunned silence, all eyes riveted to the shocking display. No one knew where to look or what to say. All except for Mark. At some point during the torrent of proof, his self-preservation instinct must have kicked in. I watched out of the corner of my eye as he tried to slink away amidst the chaos, heading for the exit. "Fat chance." "Hey," I shouted, causing him to freeze with a hand on the door. "Don't you go anywhere, you letharist piece of shit. I want you to see every last second." Any illusions of civility dropped as people gauged openly between the two of us. Mark slumped back into the room in shame as I continued battering him and Emily with recorded depravity of their affair. Finally, when the last lurid photo flickered across the screen, I tossed the laptop aside and stared out over the sea of appalled onlookers. My chest heaved with tattered breaths, so much pin-up hurt and rage whirling through me. I waited for anyone to speak up and defend Emily, to claim this was also an elaborate mistake, but not a soul uttered a syllable of dissent, just dropped jaws and accusing stares. With a defeated whimper, Emily turned and fled the stage, disappearing backstage amidst choked sobs. "You want her?" I shouted after her crumpled form, voice dripping with venom. "You can have the worthless whore." After that, the party deflagrated into absolute chaos. These parents rushed backstage to console her while everyone else launched into furious chatter. Mark's wife Claire unleashed an ear-splitting outburst of rage upon him while his mortified children looked on. As for me, I slumped into a chair with a crystal tumbler of scotch and took it all in, emotionally. Spent. All the careful planning, all the secrets and lies they'd all led to this explosive, seismic release of pain and acrimony. And at the center of it all was precious Emily, now utterly disgraced and alone. In the aftermath, divorce proceedings were inevitable. Truth be told, after such a heinous betrayal, the idea of trying to make amends turned my stomach. I would cut Emily out of my life entirely. At least that's what I told myself then. In quieter, more reflective moments, I'll admit to having twinges of regret over tarnishing her in such a public, brutal manner. But then I'll remember the sting of that first photo, of the one showing Emily riding naked in the throes of pleasure with that loser Mark, the one that defiled the sanctity of our marriage beyond redemption. So no, I don't feel guilty about ruining their lives. If anything, I regret not making the humiliation even worse for those two degenerate cheaters. Let that haunt them forever. As for me, I've moved on to rebuild and focus on my own happiness now. But I know if I ever cross another faithless snake like Emily again, God help them, because the gloves are officially off. And there is no low to low when it comes to exacting revenge.